welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. So quickly, our sponsors. We are proudly sponsored by Yugoku caps. You've seen me wearing them on the podcast. You can get the discount codes from me, send me a message. I'll send them to you. They're floating around. We're also sponsored by Phoenix head torches. Same thing goes. If you're after a discount code, just get in touch. There are there on the web, but if you want them personally from me, I will send them to you. And also, finally, we are proudly sponsored by Home Trails. So Home Trails is my YouTube series interviewing famous trail runners from hopefully around the world at some point. In the UK at the moment, where we interview them on the trail in the home trails. You understand what it is, don't you? You've listened to the show. That's hopefully turning into a bit of a brand, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, on with the actual show. Right, we're recording, so I'm going to say your name before I get it wrong. Rebecca Devereux, yeah?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you got it.
Well, you also go by the name of
Mwanga as well, and Becky. So yeah, who knows who I am?
So on Instagram, you're Rebecca Runs Wild, aren't you? So
That's probably easier to remember.
So do you go by Becky or Beck or Rebecca or?
So normally if I'm getting in trouble, it's Rebecca, or in serious situations, and then friends call me Becky. So yeah, but then clients at work call me Rebecca. So all sorts. I'll answer to most.
I think so. I'm Samuel, but as a kid I was Sam, always Sam. Um, but my mum always called me Samuel because that was you knew you were in
Yeah,
trouble when you were called by your full
yeah.
name. But in like later years, now as I've got older, I've kind of preferred to have my full name and I use it more and more for stuff. So if anyone asks what my name was, I used to always just say Sam, but now I'm like, I'll give my full name, Samuel.
Samuel. Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems more. Is it more professional? I don't know.
Yeah, they're both good names. It's fine.
Right. Okay. So you are a new guest. So like recently, I've been talking to loads of returning guests. So people coming back on and just me catching up with what they've been up to and everything. So it's nice to be able to have somebody new on and ask the superhero question. So I've already primed you on this, haven't I? So I'm hoping
Yes.
you've got an answer. So for people that haven't listened before or watched before, the superhero question is basically if we're all of us as trail runners, as ultra runners, we're all superheroes in one way or of another. So all superheroes have an origin story or a background story, how they got to be who they were. So Rebecca, what is your superhero origin story? How did you become the runner that you are now, and where did it start? And go back as far as you like or as short as you like.
Okay. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I feel like I've looked at the list of previous people you've had on this podcast, and I've got big boots to fill. So I'll tell you my story, but I'm not sure how good it is. I was always sporty at school, but just team sports and stuff. Never did any running. And then, like lots of girls, I suppose, stopped doing sport after school. Just sort of didn't do it. Was just busy with other things. And then I had my two kids, and it was after having my first child, I got sort of back into sport a bit because I just needed a break from life, something else to do. So I started playing tennis, and then I joined a mum's group after my second child. But then COVID came and I couldn't do it anymore because obviously you couldn't do any of your group activities. And I was really struggling with it, really. I work as a vet, so we weren't closed during COVID at all. We were open, but it was actually harder for us because we'd furloughed a lot of our staff. So we were on reduced staff, but we were super busy. We still had all the emergencies, and I was running the practice. So sort of had the combination of trying to sort of do the vetting side of things, but also the management side too, which is really hard. Obviously, you've got the kids running around, everyone's at home being stressed out. So I just needed to get out somehow. So I started running, and it was something that I never thought that I would do. I was always very anti-running, just like couldn't do it at all. And I think especially living where I live in West Yorkshire in Hebden Bridge, and where we are, it's valley, sort of the steep hills on each side. And for me, that was just like impossible. I think I just kind of saw the vision of what runners were around us. Everyone's like fell runners. They're all sort of like super fit in their little shorts and vests, like sprinting up the hills and things. And that just wasn't what I was. So I didn't think it was possible. But then I just, yeah, had to go and do it. So I did my first run. This was like January 2021. So I'm one of those people, I've literally got every single run that I did on Strava because it's quite recent. So I've documented the whole journey. And yeah, I think my first run was just like, oh my gosh, the hills are terrible around here. But I got out and I did it. And then, yeah, I just kind of started. And I think for the first year, I was just sort of running, just going out on my own, and not training for anything, just doing it as sort of an escape from life. And then it kind of sort of progressed on from there. And I did my first race the following April. Yeah, got the bug.
And you've never stopped since.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you raise a good point actually, like where you sort of reside, where you live, and it being conducive to more that kind of running, like fell running and everything. Because I know that area well enough because of the Spine race, and I know that yeah, it's basically you drop down off Studley Pike down into Hebden, and then you either go across town and then you go up that horrible hill to the finish of the sprint,
Yeah.
or if you're doing like Challenger South or the full race, you go up an even worse hill, like further across the valley, and have to get like you traipsing. Oh, that hill is horrific. So I can see why you would sort of be put off running if that's all you've got to do. Because one way or another, you've got to go up a hill, haven't you, when you live around there?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
But I always think that I always wonder how people, because I grew up like in if you know anywhere in the Midlands around Derby, so I grew up in a place called Burton on Trent, which is
Yeah.
just like pretty much just a flat valley with a river. The Trent goes through it, so hills for me were just like running. Like I lived at the top of a hill, but it's not particularly the steep hill. But when I
Yeah.
started running, I thought that was a big hill, and it used to and I used to be out of breath and walking up that hill. And it's a big step, isn't it, to go from sort of running locally to then going out into like the Peak District and finding out like what real hills are. Um, so it always amazes me that there's people sort of start off in that sort of environment. And I suppose maybe it just if you don't know any different, then
Yeah, that's it. I
yeah,
mean, there wasn't a choice. There isn't a choice where we are here. You either run up and down the canal, which is fine. I mean, I did it when I was marathon training earlier this year, but it gets a bit monotonous. Or you get up the hill. And I think for me, one of the sort of barriers was that you kind of presume that if you're not into the sort of running, trail running scene, whatever, you presume that you have to run up it and you've got to, go fast and that side of things, where actually you don't. And you can start off just walking, and that's what I did. Obviously started walking up, but then when you get on the tops, it's amazing. And you've got all that space and you've got areas where you can sort of run, so you can gradually build it. But if you haven't got anyone around you showing you that that's the case, then you just presume I can't do it and I'm not gonna be able to
yeah.
do it, so it puts you off.
It's like the secret that we all keep into it. The ultra running is just power hiking into it.
Yeah.
Power. Don't tell anyone. It's okay. It's okay because the listeners they already know the secret, so it's
All
fine.
right.
But if this is the first time you're listening to a podcast that is about ultra running, then you've been let into a secret now that we
Join the
walk
gang.
we walk the hills. And some races we walk more than others, and
Yeah.
obviously the one that you've signed up for, which is the reason why we've sort of got this conversation going and this podcast episode arranged, is for that you are taking on part of possibly the most brutal race that you can do in this country. So, other than living in Hebden, what made you think that that was a good idea?
Yeah, I must be mad. So living in Hebden is part of it. So I hadn't, obviously, prior to 2021, I hadn't heard of the Spine because wasn't sort of, on my radar. And then when I sort of gradually got more into the running and the trail running and the ultra running. Obviously, it's one of the main events, so everybody knows about it. And I think wasn't this year, but sort of the year before, I had been out on a run and actually saw sort of the leaders of the spine coming through, and I was like, oh, what's going on? There was a guy at Stoodley Pike taking photos, so I was like, what's this, what's happening? And he's like, oh yeah, it's the spine and the front runners are coming through. So you know, there was a point on my run where I was leading the spine for about 300 meters, loving it going down. But yeah, I mean, that obviously piqued my interest, and sort of seeing such a, you know, big race coming through, and then you get into it and you start the dot watching and sort of watching all the stuff on YouTube and that side of things. And then, yeah, I've kind of done some other bits and pieces with my running, was looking at the next thing to do, and the next step. And obviously we all watched Jack doing his thing. That was pretty cool, wasn't it? And I was sort of toying around with ideas, and it planted a seed. And then basically I messaged Sabrina, who's one of the co-founders of Black Trail Runners at the time. And I was like, oh, it's niggling a bit about this spine thing. You know, it seems like it might be a good idea, but am I being completely crazy? Because I've never done a race overnight. I've only done like, my longest run has been like 77k, but that was during the day and it wasn't a race and it was supported. Am I being crazy thinking that possibly doing the winter spine sprint might be a good idea? And she basically just said, look, if I lived where you lived and had the opportunity to train on the course like you do, I'd 100% do it. And you can do it. Like you've done the distance, you like bad weather. So, you know, this, you can do it. So yeah, I made the choice. I was like, right, apply.
And you're,
Might be an error.
you're running home as well, aren't you? Basically.
Exactly.
So
That was one of the main points. So every time this is what I keep saying to myself, I'm literally running to somewhere where I can pretty much see my house from, and I can be in a bath within 10 minutes. So that's the main sort of thing that will keep me going. And I actually run past, so the end of the course runs past the bottom of my road. So it's literally running home. So yeah, I kind of felt obliged to do it. It's, you know, I can't not.
it's funny, isn't it, how like when you're in the world, when you're in the trail run and ultra running world, that the spine is this absolutely massive thing, isn't it? That everybody, once you know about it, you know about it, and it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like the world of trail running is, it's like the pinnacle of it in this country. But when, if you're not a runner, you haven't got a clue, have you, that it even exists?
I speak to people at work about it and they're just like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. I don't understand why or what this thing is. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you've
It's
got to be
true.
in the right group.
Yeah, I was talking to I interviewed a podcaster from America, and we were sort of talking about the professionalization of trail running and how it's changed over the years, and how, you know, all the big ultra runners, you know, in years past were, you know, they had full-time jobs and families, and they would go and do these like amazingly epic races and, you know, like win them. And then on Monday morning they'd go into work, and like the co-workers would be like, oh, what did you get up to weekend? And they're like, oh yeah, I won this ultra marathon. And they're like,
What?
what's ultra marathon? And
No
it's like
idea.
it's a bit of a like subculture. It's a niche of a niche of a niche, isn't it? Ultra. So, and the thing with it is there's so many different types of races and different courses you can do that
Yeah.
yeah, you'd never be bored, would you? Absolutely.
There's plenty to keep us occupied.
Yeah, yeah. So what have you done about sort of training for it then? Have you because it's, you know, quite a big undertaking, isn't it? To sort of, you know, the mileage is the mileage, but
Mm,
spine miles are different miles
yeah,
to a lot of
100%.
races. So what have
I've
you?
learned that.
Yeah, what I mean, yeah, because you just think like 10 miles, you know, 10 miles is 10 miles, but it's very different on the spine, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what have you sort of have you got a coach to get you through it, or have you just taken advice from people? What approach have you taken to it?
So I do have a coach. So I did with Black Trail Runners, I did a race last September in Austria, mountain race. So I'd never done a mountain race before. And as part of that, I got a coach to sort of train me for that. And then I've basically kept up with Sam, so he's at Kings of the Wild Frontier, with all the stuff that I've done since then. So we've been sort of working on a plan specifically for the spine, which yeah, so what I'm trying to do is do as much on the course as possible. So I obviously I do some sort of different sessions during the week, but all of my long training runs, I'm trying to do majority on the course. Partly so that I can recce it, so that I know what I'm not going to get lost. I know what the course is and what the conditions are like. But also just to give me some confidence, get used to my kit and, you know, in various conditions or whatever. And that's been quite an eye opener, to be fair. I've done the whole course now, so I've seen it all. There's some bits that are better than others, and well, better for me than others. But yeah, so that's sort of how we've been breaking it down. And then we've been kind of trying to do some at night as well, because I'm trying to get my sort of night running experience up as well, because that's been pretty minimal up to this point. And then trying to do some sort of double days as well. So doing sort of split it into 3 sections basically, and trying to do each section, some double days, some at night, just to try and get into it a bit, which I hope is working.
Yeah. What are your favorite bits of that route? And what are the worst bits for you?
Yeah, so obviously I like the end section because I know it, because I've ran it lots of times before. So I think pretty much from sort of the White House home, like I'm totally happy with that. I like it. I'm looking forward to that bit. And then I think the bit as well, sort of from Marsden on, is okay. That seems sort of better for me. It's more runnable. The nav's not that tricky. So yeah, I sort of like that bit. I did a recce of the first section from Edale. Was it last weekend, the weekend before? And I was very tired. I'd been away with work, and yeah, I kind of got my nav a bit wrong. I'm not sure how I managed to go up Jacob's Ladder and then back down again somehow. Just added some extra meters on randomly. So yeah, I'm going to go back and do that section. I mean, I'd even, when I was at Kendal a few weeks ago, I'd spoken to Rini about it, Rini McGregor, and she was saying, there is a bit you just, when you get up on Kinder, you need to really focus and concentrate and make sure you're taking the right. So I'd listened to all of that, but still got up there. And so I went up and it was having a great time, and then sort of went back on this track, and then all these walkers were like, oh, well done, are you doing it again? And I was like, what? oh no. So yeah, that was a bit silly. And then yeah,
Had you gone to the top? Had you gone to the top of Jacob's Ladder and then gone down that alternative route that brings you back down then? Because there's another path that
yeah,
brings you down, isn't there? Yeah.
it was a different path I'd got down, and then I was like, oh wait, I'm here again. And then yeah, I had to go back up. It was impressive. So yeah, I need to do that bit again. And then because of that, I was meeting a friend at Torside, and the plan was to go from Torside to the next sort of road crossing. But because of that, I was on a schedule, but obviously because of my minor detour, I was a little bit late. But then that also meant that I was doing sort of it in the dark when I wasn't supposed to. So I hadn't done Bleaklow, got to sort of the road and was like, oh, it's getting dark, should I do it? But anyway, managed to get to the top before it got totally dark. So I managed to get down. But yeah, I need to do that bit in the light again, better, where I can see where I'm going. But yeah, it's just a bit trickier underfoot, isn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of,
That's
you have in your head where you're going to run, but then I'm like, oh yeah, it's pretty tricky. So
I think one of the tricky bits, like on Kinder, but I think when you're in a race, it's not too bad because you can, if you stay with people, the nav is okay. But you know, I've been up there in all weathers, like on my own and stuff, doing bits and bobs of running and recce's and stuff, and you know, routes that I've been running up there for years now, and a bit of fog rolls in, a bit of cloud rolls in, and you know, I've been following my watch, and even though I know it, I've been following my watch, and I've still stood there and started second guessing like a
yeah,
like GPX file, thinking it's, you know, I've seen that rock before, or I haven't seen that rock, or
yeah.
not
It's all those
trusting.
rocks, they look the same.
They do all look the same, yeah. And if you like, you can convince yourself that you've seen something that you knew should, like, that you thought should be there,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the other bit I'm not that keen on is when you drop down to Torside. So you drop down that really muddy, well, I say depending on what time of year it is, but most of the time it's muddy, where you're in that sort of ravine and you're going through all that heather, and there's like it's just, well, like a single track that takes you down the edge.
Yeah.
It all goes all the way down to Torside. And I've you know, in the spine in January, when I did the full spine in January, and I slipped and fell there, and like pulled my hamstring, and I thought, I've literally, like, I've not even, you know, how far have I got, and I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm like out the race, but fortunately
Mentally, that's tough.
I was just being, I was just being a bit over the top, and I was fine, absolutely fine. I just needed a minute to just collect myself. But yeah, it can change so much, can't it? That section with the weather, so you
Yeah.
can even when it's like middle of summer, I've been, I did the sprint in the summer, just gone, and it was torrential rain, and it
Yeah,
was more
yeah,
like
that's it. The
it
weather's just
felt,
like it's such a big thing, isn't it? And that's the for me, it's that unknown that is the stressful part of it, just not knowing what the
yeah,
conditions are gonna be like. Because yeah, it makes a huge difference underfoot with your nav, like seeing what's going. Yeah, it's huge, isn't it, with it?
yeah, and kit. So a lot of
Yeah.
people sort of, when you hear about the kit list and when you see the kit list, you think, is this really necessary? But actually, when you do the race or you do any of the distances, and if you have to use a bit of kit out of that list, and if you didn't have it, you'd
Yeah.
soon be complainers. I know I was speaking to somebody about being up on Crossfell, so that's obviously like further up the race.
Yeah.
And the wind's up there. So I always thought that, I'd never worn goggles at all for running. I was like, it has to be really extreme to be wearing goggles. Um, I thought, sunglasses would probably, surely sunglasses would do.
Mm.
But there was a section up on Crossfell. Was it Crossfell that I went up on? No, he was on Crossfell, and he was saying that he was just doing a training run, and he hadn't taken his full spine kit with him, and he wishes
Mm.
he'd got his goggles with him because the wind was so strong. That
Yeah.
yeah, so I used mine going over Pen um, and if I'd not had those goggles, I'd have been in trouble. So how are you
Mm.
feeling about sort of testing kit? Have you got everything together that you definitely going to use? Have you still got decisions to make on kit, or are you sort of
It's a little bit, so I'm getting there. I think I mean, it's a big list, isn't it? It's a big, expensive list to try and get everything together. And that's been one of the good things about being part of BTR is that I've been able to sort of reach out to some of the community members for help with some things. So like my Garmin tracker, I borrowed off a guy, Andy. I got my bag, I borrowed off Rini. I've just tried to get as much together from people with experience that, I can and get stuff from. But yeah, there are bits. I did the Hardmoors Rosebery on Sunday, and the weather was pretty crazy, pretty windy. There was a good sort of 2-3 hours where it was very, very windy, very, very rainy, a bit haily. So that was a good check of where we're at with things and a good test of jackets and bits and pieces. I need some better waterproof trousers, one of the things that I definitely decided. But yeah, it's getting out in times like that. So I've been out when it was snowing a few weeks ago. I made sure I was literally at home waiting for the snow to go just so I could get out there and just see what my kit was like in practice with that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely getting there. I've still not done a full pack the bag with everything, but I think sort of in the next week or so I should be at that point. I'm just kind of debating sleeping bags at the moment. So I've hired a sleeping bag, but I'm trying to decide whether to just buy one just so I can practice with it,
you
because
have to?
it's
Do you have to have one for the sprint then in winter?
yeah,
No, I
yeah,
didn't. Yeah, that's changed.
yeah.
That has. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah, because I always thought that it was just for Challenger South and above. So that's new then. So yeah,
No, yeah, you've
I
got to
mean,
have a sleeping bag, yeah.
if
But you might
it's
need it. I mean, you just don't know, do you? Like, I think I was doing a training run on the Yorkshire Peaks about 6 weeks ago, 5-6 weeks ago, and I had a bad fall then. And I was fine. And then the next minute, bam, on the ground. And, I got away with it. I was hurt, but I was lucky I didn't knock myself out. And it's a reality check. I was on my own. If you don't have your stuff and the means to contact people and know what to do, it's dangerous. You can be fine, but it can go pretty bad pretty quick. So it's worth having it all. That's why I've got it.
do you have to have a sleeping mat as well then if you're
Yeah,
carrying that? Yeah, so you're
yeah,
pretty much carrying like full
yeah,
spine kit, aren't you?
yeah.
Just for well, I say just for the sprint. Yeah, it's still
But you might need
important.
it. Hopefully, I won't. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, definitely. If you have got to get like your bivvy out and a sleeping bag and a roll mat on the sprint, then it's gonna be a
Yeah,
big year.
there's an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a bad year. But that it can happen, and you can have the worst weather on that section, and you can have like glorious glorious weather for the rest of it. So in January, like that section was sort of a bit miserly and but it was okay actually, and it got colder and colder and colder the further
Mm,
up the course. So I swapped over. So I think I started in lighter kit and then swapped over once I got to Hebden. I then, because I was obviously carrying on, I swapped
yeah.
over to heavier gear to go through the night. So I suppose that's something you've got to consider, isn't it? So if you're planning on, so what's your time scale then for, have you kind of roughly figured out what, because you've already
I mean,
said like you're going to be in the
yeah.
darkness hours. So you conscious of making sure that because you obviously can't, you don't get access to a drop bag, do you, on the sprint? You're
No.
literally going from the start to checkpoint one. So you don't have that advantage of being able to put extra stuff in there and then deciding when you get to a checkpoint whether you
Mm,
need it. You've got to have it. So
yeah.
is that affecting the decisions you're making about kit, or am I just putting that thought in your head now?
No, 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 no. So I've got it. I think, one of I had a chat with Gary Chapman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Legend
Yeah,
of the
so
climb.
yeah, so I mean he's local to me. He's down the road and I do sort of he does the Haworth Hobble and the Yorkshireman. I've done the Hobble a couple of times. So he would kindly sort of jumped on a call with me just because I wanted to pick his brain for advice because he obviously has got loads of experience.
Yeah,
And sort of one of the main things that he said to me was, completing it's not about necessarily your fitness. It's more about making sensible decisions. And that's what will get you through. So it's, thinking not what the weather's like now, what's the weather like coming up, making sure you get your kit on before it comes rather than panicking in the pouring rain trying to get stuff on, which to be fair at the race that I did on Sunday, I made an error there. I put my jacket on at about the right time but didn't put trousers on. It was too late. It's making those sensible decisions. So I think it'll be looking at what the weather's like. There's the bit so from sort of Crowdon across is slower. I know it's slower because that bit on it like Lado Rocks, when it goes on that sort of single track, I'm not going to be sprinting along there. So the chance is that if it's colder or wet, that's when I will get colder or wet. So I need to be ready with my kit for that bit, especially if it's dark or whatever. I'm hoping the section after that I'll be running more. So it's just trying to plan it according to that, but it is already in my thoughts as to how I'm going to sort of break it up. But as you say, you haven't got the checkpoint, so we've just got to do it on the move, thinking about it. I am generally a very hot person. Everyone jokes at me because I'm always in shorts and a vest. I'm not planning on doing the whole span sprint in shorts and a vest. I'll be surprised if that happens. But yeah, that I have to sort of take that into account as well. So probably won't be as layered up as many, but I will be conscious of the layers.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, that's one of the greatest like lessons that you can sort of learn in ultra running, I think, especially in this country, is learning to put your kit on well in advance of when things, because like you say, when you start, if you're putting a jacket on when it's absolutely chucking it down the rain, it's kind of defeating the object of it, aren't you?
Yeah,
You want to be keeping the rain off you so you don't get chilled, because once you're soaked, aren't you? And you don't really,
yeah,
you're not going to dry out. You're just going to stay
no,
wet for the rest of the race. So I think having stopping and making that decision, although it may feel like you're wasting time, you're not wasting time, because
no,
it's
not in the long run.
money in the bank really. So
Mm.
it seems like you got your head screwed on with all that stuff. That's good, because
Fingers crossed.
a lot of people do sort of kind of go into the race a bit blind. They're like, or see it and they just think, oh yeah, that looks ace. It's the shortest distance out of the races,
Mm.
so I can just do it. And if you've done, even if you've done like a trail like 50K or something, doing like comparing, doing like a summer 50K in the Peak District isn't doing the
No,
sprint.
it's not the same. No.
Yeah, it's
But
yeah,
you've got to respect it, haven't you? I mean,
yeah,
there's
that's
a reason it's got its, name. It's
it.
most brutal because it is like, and even if you're not doing the full distance, the course is hard and the weather can be crazy. So you've got to respect it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's good. It's good to know that you've got that respect already. So what's your involvement with Adidas Terrex then? How did that sort of come about? That that.
Yeah. So I mean, it started off, so obviously I'm part of Black Trail Runners, and Terrex work with Black Trail Runners, so they support the charity in various ways. And then my sort of journey with it is last April-ish. Black Trail Runners put out a call. They wanted some runners to take part in Infinite Trails, which is Adidas's sort of trail running event in Europe that they run. And they were looking for 3 females to do it. So I signed up, and we did it. We made a little film about our journey, as sort of the first team comprised of women who were people of color to compete at the race. And we did it. So that sort of started the journey with Terrex. They supported us doing that. And then it's kind of sort of an ongoing thing with them. So they've been really supportive in all of the sort of crazy adventures that I've got up to in the meantime. So they've got sort of a formal link with the charity, and then they help me out with stuff as well. So it's been really good.
Yeah, brilliant combo. Yeah, so that was one of the subjects I wanted to talk to you about, definitely, because I've been around the sport for a long time, and admittedly, the sort of demographic of ultra running was middle-aged white male, and
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah.
Um,
True.
so what's and I've seen sort of the Black Trail Runners, appear, and the page and everything, and it's great, absolutely great. What is the sort of the mission of the collective?
Yeah.
What you're trying to achieve? I know you're not, we discussed that you're not here to represent them, but you are a member and stuff as such, aren't you? So.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, we're a charity or a community, and we just want to increase inclusion and participation of people of Black ethnicity in trail running as general. I mean, it's trying to get the outdoors more inclusive, and getting people out there that wouldn't normally be there, because it is, we know the benefits of being out. We know the joy that we get from running and doing these events, and it's trying to make it more accessible for people. So I came to it. My first trail race that I went to was one in the Lake District, so 16K, Lake District one. And I'm from the Northeast, so I'm from where there's a mainly white demographic. When I was growing up, I was the only person of color, so I'm used to being in those sort of situations. I work as a vet. Everybody's white. It's very you don't see that many vets that are black or brown either. So I'm used to being in those situations. But then I went to that race, and I got there, and I think partly because it was the first race, because I hadn't done any road race, I didn't know races at all, so it was the first ever sort of race that I'd done. And I got there, and my husband went off to go and, I don't know, buy some food or something, and left me in the field looking to where to register. And I kind of just stood in the middle of the field and looked around and was like, whoa. Like, I feel pretty exposed here. Like, I'm definitely the only one. And it was really weird feeling for me, because I hadn't felt like that for a very, very long time. So it was kind of, I didn't really know what I felt about it. I mean, obviously there was the nerves of the race as well, so not knowing what to do with that, but it kind of got my brain ticking about it, as that feels a bit funny. And anyway, the same week, I went to a film showing in Manchester, and Sabrina was there with Martin Johnson as well, showing his film about his FKT on the Thames. And they started talking about Black Trail Runners, and I was like, oh, actually, there are other people that are doing this. I'm not the only person. I just need to find them, and they are doing work to try and sort of improve it as well. And listening to people that understood from their own lived experience how I felt on that day, and we're actually doing something positive to try and improve it, was really inspiring. So that's kind of how I got into it, and that's, it was sort of gone on from there, because it is a big thing. I was just thinking, look, if I feel uncomfortable in that situation, and I'm used to being in those situations, this is normal for me, how is someone who comes from, say, an urban background where they're normally just surrounded by their own community going to feel rocking up to something like this? Well, they're not going to come, are they? They're not even going to step across, because they're going to be like, no, I don't belong there. This is not the place for me. So that's kind of how I got into it. And it's, we're trying to do work to break down the barriers that are present that mean that people can't participate. So I suppose the main thing is it's not about being exclusive. It's not saying that we only want Black trail runners. We just want it to be more diverse generally in trail running. So that's kind of where we go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, for me, it's just been a case of sort of being naive to it that, I'd not even, until I saw Black Trail Runners, I was like, yeah, actually, that makes complete sense that you don't always see people of color out running. And why do you think there's sort of been that sort of lack of uptake in the community for trail running? Is it just because trail running is, I know it's not a new sport, but ultra running sort of been around for a while and stuff. But what do you think? What has been sort of is it just been the case that, like you say, people are worried that they would feel excluded, and that's why they've not got involved?
I mean, there's barriers that are there. So we know, so we do a running festival, which is in its third year now. So Black to the Trails. It's sold out the last 2 years. Looking at sort of the stats for it, I think for the last one, it was 70% people of colour, 70% women. So the demand is there. It's not that Black people don't want to do trail running. If you put the event on and you make people feel welcome, they will turn up and they will do it. But there's barriers that stop people from doing it. And some of it might be financial, some of it might be transport. If you're in a mainly urban area and you've never historically been out to the countryside to do things, say your family doesn't go out to the country and it's never been on your radar to do it, you probably don't even necessarily think about it, never mind sort of just, sign up to do a race. So, it's trying to look at those barriers and see what we can do as a group to improve it. Things like, if you say going out on the fells, navigation, if you've never been taught navigation or mountain safety, you don't know even like the country code, like countryside code, like you're not going to feel safe. And a lot of it is about feeling safe in the environment you're in. And to feel safe, you need to know that you belong and you need to have the skills to make you feel safe. So we do a lot of social runs, so that adds the community aspect to it. So we're trying to increase the number of social runs that we're doing. So we've just recently started doing a BTR Cumbria to try and sort of focus in the north a bit, because we've had a lot of them sort of being more down south. And obviously the environment's different in Cumbria as well. We've got all sort of the Lake Bells and stuff like that. So we do things like that. We do taster days where people can come and join and learn some skills, learn some nav, be around people that are more experienced. It's just trying to get rid of the barriers, make people feel safe and just get them involved, because once they start, they'll get into it. It's just taking those few first steps. Like with the festival, it's for all abilities and for all ages. So you don't have to be an experienced trail runner to do it. You can have never run a kilometer or 5K. You can still rock up and do it, because it's a big social event. Obviously there's a race in it as well, but it doesn't matter if you're not racing. If you just want to participate, that's enough. And often just getting people over the line and getting them to try it, once they actually experience what the outdoors is like and being in the countryside's like, then they start taking those additional steps. And obviously you've got people like myself or Sabrina or Simba sort of doing, the big races, the Spine, UTMB, that side of things. Everyone is not going to do that. But if people see and there's representation and they see that people of colour are doing those things, they're more likely to then take those little steps. But the representation is really important, because if people don't see it, then they don't think that people are doing it, and they don't feel like they should be doing it. So it really matters.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Do you think a lot of it is role models? So having somebody that you sort of aspire to that looks like you, that you can relate to. Do you think that's needed more, or do you feel that there's enough role models for people of color in trail running?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely it does. Representation matters. And I know from growing up, when I was growing up, there was never any people that looked like me doing the stuff that I did. And so you don't, everyone, I always felt like I was different, and I didn't have those role models. Obviously that's changing now, but a lot of it is sort of things like the sports brands taking it into account and thinking, okay, let's not just use the same sort of standard image of what trail running looks like on our promotions. Same with races. If you're advertising races, like Maverick have done it a lot, and we've sort of done a lot of work with Maverick, and they've been really good, and they do use sort of people from the community on their adverts and on their socials and things, and that does make people think, oh, actually, yeah, I can do that. It makes a really big difference. I've got kids. I want my daughter to see this is totally normal, that this is what we do, not that it's, oh, it's crazy that there's a Black person doing that. I want it to be normal that we do it. And when we went to Black to the Trails, so my kids have come to Black to the Trails the last 2 times when it's been on, my daughter literally said to me, she was like, I've never been to a race where there's other people that look like you, mummy, and there's loads here. She was like, whoa, like totally amazed by it. But you know, it doesn't have to be that everybody is black at the race, but at least if there is some representation and makes it more normal for people, and that will make people more likely to do it. So yeah, representation is really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. So with BTR then, is the hope that eventually you don't need BTR. Eventually,
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
just
If
becomes.
we get to a point where we don't need to have black trail runners, then that's it. That's we've won. It's the result. Yay, that's it. So you know, I'm not trying to get rid of the charity because I love it and I love being part of the community. But if we get to a point where we don't need it, yeah, of course, that's the ideal situation where we have got sort of a diverse trail running scene and don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, that's great. What what sort of things have you got coming up then for with BTR that you sort of that you want to talk about? The you know you talk about like the social runs and everything, and it's sort of expanding. Then what is the on the horizon? I know we've sort of said you're not here representing the BTR, but
Yeah.
if you know of what the sort of plans are for rolling out going forward into the next year and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got the social runs is something that we really want to grow. So, because I think getting at that sort of community level, groups of people together and getting them started and getting people introduced, that's really, really important. So, as I said, we've sort of had the first couple of BTR Cumbria ones. We've got more sort of popping up in Birmingham, sort of Bristol, London, like there are sort of popping up more. So we really want to sort of encourage that. We've got some exciting sort of collaborations with some brands coming up, which is going to get sort of announced sort of towards the end of the year and early next year, which is really good. And our membership is growing. Like I think we've got something like 12,000 followers on Instagram, it's like 13,000 followers on Strava. So it is, you know, a growing movement and a growing group, and it's exciting to see sort of, you know, what's coming next. I know personally, there's a lot of work sort of behind the scenes with race directors, trying to work with them to sort of work on how they can actually improve diversity within sort of, you know, their events. And that's the stuff that doesn't get seen from, you know, the outside, but it's taking those little steps to try and improve things sort of on a bigger level.
Yeah, that's another good point that you raised there about race directors. I remember interviewing Sophie Power, who spoke. You know, she does loads of work to do with just for women's running, just trying to raise awareness of issues and stuff that come up in races and stuff. And she was sort of saying, traditionally, like you've sort of I spoke about, like the demographic of an ultra runner used to be white middle-aged male. So is it the same thing that white middle-aged males are the race directors as well? Are they the ones that are putting on these races? And what do you think that how can that sort of tide be turned? That is it just purely just the work that you could be doing with BTR, just sort of informing people that are probably just a bit naive to that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things that BTR does with sort of the races is that if we're going to sort of work with race directors, we ask that they collect the information on diversity. Because that's the first thing is, and people I think are sometimes worried about that because usually it shows that the races aren't very diverse. That's, you know, the general finding. But if you don't have the stats in the first place, you can't see whether the measures that you're putting in are making a difference. So by collecting that data at the start and then seeing what you do, then you can obviously see if you've got improvement. And I think a lot of the time it's have people actually reached out to communities and asked, what are the barriers? What are the things that would make it easier for you to come? Or what could we do? You know, I think sometimes because the conversations seem difficult or uncomfortable, it's conversations that people don't want to have, and then it just gets ignored. But if we have, say, people that are going to races, ask the question to the race director. If you look around at a race and see that everybody is white male of a, you know, certain age demographic, ask what are you doing to, you know, improve diversity at the race? Have you done anything? What's going on? Because we can talk about it. As a person of color, I can shout about it and talk about it, but it's more likely they're going to listen to the main demographic that are attending the races because they're the people that are paying the money to go. So if they ask the questions, they're more likely to listen and do something about it. And maybe approach, say, a group like BTR, or, you know, local community groups and say, okay, how can we get you involved? What can we do? How can we improve things? That makes a difference.
So is it a case of BTR reaching out to races, or is it you just want races to just use you as a use BTR as a resource then?
Yeah, I
To
know that it doesn't have to be us. Like, it just, do you have anybody sort of within your, I don't know, running club or whatever that is a person of color or that you can speak to and for their experience? There's plenty of people around. It's just that sometimes conversations don't happen, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, so how does the spine stack up then as far as diversity goes, as far as you know?
I mean, there's been a few BTR members that have done it, so that I'm following the footsteps of some of our members. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty typical, I think, isn't it? It's
Because
I'm not saying anything.
I would argue that the spine probably is one of those races that's probably is geared more towards the original demographic of white middle-aged man because it's an expensive race to do.
Yeah,
It's like a middle-aged thing to do. So that was like
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like that demographic of someone who is sort of, in the 40s, late 40s, got a bit of money, can spend it on an expensive race. So for me,
Mm.
I feel like that's probably the spine is probably, although, it is, I see plenty of people of colour at the spine. That probably could be a race that's probably maybe would have struggled in the past, maybe with
Yeah.
not having that sort of diversity in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a tricky one, but I say like things like, as a charity having things like we have like an equipment loan scheme. So if people are doing an event and they need to borrow kit, we have like a centralized sort of load of kit that people can borrow. So say I borrowed some poles when I did Infinite Trails, or there's bits and pieces that you can get. And then if there's not stuff within the actual main charity, the connections you make because of got community, it can help with it. I mean, it's still, don't, get me wrong, it's still an expensive race to do. And that, I'm lucky that I have got those options to try and get bits and pieces, but it's still costing me, money to do it. So it does have barriers, but it's just anything that makes it a little bit more accessible, for people helps. And if someone really wants to do it, then they can, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great that support's there. Yeah. Um, so what's the plan for you then after the spine then? So if everything goes, and I hope it does, everything goes
If
to
I
plan
survive.
in January. What are you thinking long term about the possibilities of what you could do? Or I suppose you don't really know, do you, until
I
you
don't
know
know.
how you're going
I've
to do
got a
the
few
bike.
bits. Yeah, I mean, everyone that I talk to, spine related, is like, oh, once you've done the sprint, then the next step, da, 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 da. And I literally can't in my mind imagine doing longer than the sprint at this point, because it's just like that in itself seems like such a massive challenge that I keep regretting. No, not regretting really, but you know what I mean. You get moments of like, what am I doing? So yeah, I mean, I've got sort of some plans down already for next year. I'm doing UTS 50K. I want to get some stones because I would like to do OCC at some point. So that's kind of like the longer term aim. I'm doing London Marathon, just because it'd be nice to do a roadblock and do that. So I'm doing that. And then yeah, we're going to see for the rest of the year, really. I think get this next 5 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, out of the way, see what shape the body's in, and then work it out from there. It'll either be, oh yes, I definitely want to do it again. Longer, I'll be like, never again.
think I think people are right though that once you've been bitten by the spine bug, it's a hard one to shake. I did the very first summer sprint when they first put that sprint on. And that would have been like that was during it was still during COVID times. So I think it was 20, would it have been 21? I can't remember if it was the summer of 21. I think it might have been. And I did that and I thought, yeah, that's enough for me. That I'll never do it because at that point I was still in my phase of just being specializing in sort of 50k to 50 miles, and that was kind of my
Mhm.
wheelhouse. Runnable trail 50Ks, fast 50Ks when I used to be fast, not anymore. And 50 milers and stuff, and the occasional like 100k. So for years, I never sort of even like entertain the idea of doing any of the longer distances,
Mm.
until I then volunteered on the race. So I volunteered on the checkpoint first,
Yep.
and then I volunteered on, managed to wangle my way onto the media team um, in 20, so that would have been 23, January 23. And I then, because I was a volunteer, I wasn't being paid to work on the media team, I was just a volunteer. I was eligible for the volunteer lottery. So I put my name
Okay.
into the lottery, thinking, nothing would come of it. And I won a place on any. So, I'd had this awkward conversation with my wife.
Gotta
I was
do
like,
it.
well, I've potentially won a place that's worth, X amount of
Yeah,
money.
yeah,
I do the full race. This could be my chance to do it. And up until then, I'd
yeah.
only the furthest I'd ran was 100K. Um, so I was like, right, that's it. I'm gonna get my money's worth, and I'm doing the full
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I put in for the full winter spine this year, just gone, in January. But because of that, I was like, well, I've got to try and work up to that distance. So I need to do a big race in between. So
Yeah.
then signed up for Challenger North. So rather than just going
Yeah.
in and doing like Challenger South, I thought I'll go one extra and I'll go in for Challenger
Go
North.
hard. Go hard.
So I'd gone from like running 100K to then like putting in for 160 miler. Um, but it's fine. Like you know,
You say that. It's fine. It's fine. Well, you're
I
still
mean,
here. So
yeah, exactly. You realize that it's almost like that once you're in the spine world, they call it the spine bubble. So the spine bubble starts, like on the Friday and it goes all the way through to like the following Sunday. So whether you're like a volunteer or whether you're in one of the races, you're in the spine bubble. Um, and it just feels like the races are just part of that bubble, and you either have a short bubble or you have a longer bubble. And if you're a volunteer, you have a very long bubble because you're there
very
like
long.
whole week. And if you do the race, well, like for me, I didn't finish till the Friday, so I did like Sunday to Friday. Um,
Long. It's a
right,
long
it's a
haul.
long old
Mm,
haul that was. But it doesn't feel wrong. It does, once you're in that world, it just feels like not that you can go on forever because you wouldn't want to go on forever, but it feels like whatever race you're in, you just accept it and you do it. So
yeah.
when you're doing the sprint, you know that you finished at Hebden. If you're doing
Yeah.
Challenger South, you know you finished at Hawes. You know that you just go through Hebden and you keep going. And for this full spine, you just know that at some point during
You're
the week, you're
going,
going
it'll
to
end
do
eventually.
some
It's got
point.
to end.
It does end eventually. Yeah. But yeah, don't write yourself off and think that you'll never do the full spine because maybe we'll be sat here this time next year and you're doing the full.
Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see. So,
Yeah.
at least I'm starting strong with the winter. I think that's the thing. It's like I did debate as to whether I'd do the summer or the winter,
Yeah.
like which to sort of go for. But then I kind of thought I've done sort of the distance in good
Mm.
weather, and I know
Yeah.
it's the Pennine Way, so it's slightly different. But I thought it's more of a challenge to do it in the
Yeah.
winter, so that's why I kind of went for it.
Different
So
challenges as well, actually. The summer can present, completely different challenges that are
mm.
they're different, but just as bad.
It's
Like,
tough. Yeah, yeah. I know that's from talking to people who had a really
yeah,
hard time on the summer as well. Maybe it's people, I
oh,
don't know, people underestimate it a bit as well, sort of thinking, oh, well, they'll be fine. Yeah. Or it might just rain.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, but it's still to this day the worst blisters I've ever had were on the summer races. Yeah, on Challenger
Yeah,
Knob. But
really,
I'd
really
never
bad.
had any of that issues with the winter race. I had blisters, but
Yeah.
they were nowhere near as bad as the summer. So yeah, you've chosen the right race.
Excellent, excellent.
Right. I'm aware of keeping you for too long, so I appreciate you coming on
Oh,
and
no, thank
talking,
you. It's been good.
yeah, and talking about your sort of journey to get to the spine and the adventure that's sort of taking you on. And I appreciate you sort of putting up with my questions about diversity and everything in it. conclusion
It's all right.
because it's a subject that I want to talk about, but it's like you say, it's not always something that people feel comfortable talking about. So I
Yeah, of
appreciate
course.
you coming on and giving me a helping hand with that.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's all
So
good.
yeah, so um, how many weeks away are we? Is it 5? Did you say 5 weeks?
4 or 5. Yeah.
4 or
What date
5
is
weeks.
it? Yeah, something like that.
We're not long,
Try not to
so
think about it.
I hope that the training continues to go well, and I will see you at some point. I'll have a camera of some description in my hand, and I'll see you.
Hopefully, I'll still be smiling.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. So
Hysterically laughing. We'll see. No, it's fine.
before we finish, is there anything you sort of want to sort of shout out or point people towards?
Yeah, so I suppose have a search, have a look on Instagram, or we're on Facebook as well for Black Trail Runners. You can see sort of what we're up to and what we're all about on there. And yeah, if you want to come to Black to the Trails, come to Black to the Trails. We are happy, obviously it's a festival, a running festival that's run by Black people for Black people, but also their white allies. So everyone's welcome. So come along, get your tickets and come and join us because it's a really good day out. It's really, really cool.
Brilliant.
And what's
Thank
the
you.
date? The date is the 11th of May. There you go.
Brilliant. Right,
Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes as well then. So awesome.
Perfect.
Thanks for coming on, Becky, Rebecca. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. No, it's been good to chat. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you. Bye bye bye.